I didn't touch a computer until I was in college, and we only played games on them. I mean, that was it. So anything that I have learned, I learned, since I was out of school. And it's easier to learn it today than it was then. I mean, that's the basics. So you do have to have some type of embracing. It's not fair to say, I'm just not going to deal with technology anymore.
Welcome to another edition of the NiceJob Podcast. If you like what you hear, please give this video a like and subscribe to get new content first. As always, these are just the highlights of our episode. For the full conversation, head to our podcast platforms. All right, let's see who our guest is today.
Hey, this is Royce Ard, and I am so excited because today we're going to talk about all of that data that's just weighing you down at work, what you can do to make it more manageable.
This episode I am excited about because I get to talk to a person that I haven't had a ton of conversation with, but I see just about everywhere, highly regarded in the business community, and was a huge help for us, NiceJob in particular, at a recent event. So we feel indebted to him in a way because he's such a quality individual, and I am beyond excited to have him on the show today. It is the owner of My Amazing Maid. It is Royce Ard. Royce, thank you so much for joining us here on the NiceJob Podcast.
Thanks, Sean. It's good to be here.
And in particular, we're going to talk, about a couple of different things. But for someone that may not be familiar, I always like to go back and learn a little bit about our guests and kind of their history. But I know sometimes that history is so expansive. So to kind of narrow it down, I always like to ask this sort of question. Was there a moment where you felt you got bit by an entrepreneurial bug, or that you felt like, you know what, I think I kind of found my calling and this is something I'm going to really start dedicating myself to learn, grow, and evolve in?
So my parents had their own business growing up. I had a very unique business opportunity to grow up in, but my dad was a crop duster. So I grew up in a very agricultural world. And then he became a boat owner. So, by the time I was 18, I was a boat captain. And so I've always done sort of an entrepreneurial type, gig. So when I went off to college, got out, looked for jobs, but I always looked for jobs that had an entrepreneurial slant to them. So I was always like, how can I help improve your business? That's really that's always been my tagline, is sort of, how can I help improve your business? And started a few businesses along the way, ended up over time being invited into a few startups or turnaround situations. And probably the biggest was I started as a general manager, ended up being the vice president of sales and marketing of a regional broadband company that we took from bankruptcy and sold it in 2012 for $1.5 billion. So I've been involved in everything from, catching fish all the way up to, being on Wall Street selling a large business. So I've always really looked for that entrepreneurial type spirit in anything I look for.
And I know the entrepreneurial lifestyle, it has a lot of almost an outside opinion of sometimes it's all hustle and grind and it's all about, kind of making it to a status or things like that. Those that are listening to this podcast some are brand new business owners. Some have been in for a while. But how would you define, I guess, the entrepreneurial lifestyle? Do you see it more of like, hey, it's a grind, don't stop, you're constantly every day? Or you just see it as, it's almost similar to kind of like my background in sports of like, if you're strategic and you're growing, you kind of can always make it something that you're going to get in, or you're going to get out, what you put in. How would you define entrepreneurial lifestyle?
Yeah, I would say it's whatever you want it to be. So first of all, I enjoy working in my business. So, whether it's this business, whether it was my previous job, whatever, I just enjoy the sort of the game. So I don't mind putting in some hours into it, but I always look for opportunities to have time off. I mean, so I've always looked for an opportunity that's a lifestyle type job. And I approach this the same way. And it's probably how I got so involved in systems and automation, because if you have a lot of systems and automation in your business, then that does afford for you the ability to be a lot more flexible in your schedule. So the way that we run our business today, and I'll just give you an example of that. We sold our house in December of 2020, and we bought an RV. I've been living in an RV since then. So we've taken some pretty long road trips. Once everything started with the hiring troubles and staffing issues, we ended up being a little bit closer to home. But we were able to do that, and we were able to stay in touch with our business. I mean, cloud computing changed everything, and so you can work from anywhere, so you might as well work from everywhere, right?
Yeah. We had a recent episode with Megan Likes, and she talked about a paperless office. And one of the big things in that, when you talk about kind of the cloud, is you can really set up your business to have access to so much data pretty instantly. And her whole thing with the paperless office is that you're able to keep, maybe the most important documents, keep it in a small little sort of situation. But ultimately, you can build things by going to that sort of system to have everything you need kind of at an instant push of a button. And you talk to a lot of, maybe business consultants and coaches and things of that nature. And they always talk about, I even said at the top of this show, about having data to make decisions. Do you think that we're headed a bit towards a data overload? And not necessarily that it's not important, but just as technology advances, we're starting to get to see so much of a nuanced breakdowns of things than we ever did before that perhaps has become a little bit overwhelming.
There's a few things that have happened, I think, over the years. When I first started in business, is if someone needed something from you, they would send it to you in the mail. So you have plenty of time to think about it. You have plenty of time to react to it. And then let me overnight that to you. So now things just became overnight. And then let me fax it to you. Let me email it to you. I'm just going to text you. So we've gone in business from having 4 or 5 days to make decisions on things to not only having to make them immediately, but also, and people expecting an immediate response, to also, it's so easy to do. When someone is sending you a FedEx, that costs money, so you weren't just getting overwhelmed, but a text is basically free. And so there's a lot of information going back and forth now that people are expecting a quick reply, and they're judging you based on that, how quickly and how thorough you're able to reply. So there is a lot of information flying back and forth now than just 20 years ago.
So with that, do you feel that being able to almost triage and attend to things in the proper order has become even more of a valuable skill? Because it's not like you can check the mailbox once a week. Like, you're going to get things instantly and come on through. Has that evolved over time, or has that just always been there and now it's just amplified?
Well, it's definitely amplified because just the amount of information is just so much more. But the other piece to that is you have to have a system in place to prioritize how you're going to how you're going to react to things. Okay, so for instance, let's just take if you're in a service business and you deal a lot with property managers, but you also deal with individuals. And someone who has 100 properties contacts you, you probably are going to want to respond to any issues that they have quicker than if someone who you do work for every 5 years responds to you. So you have to have systems in place so that you're able to prioritize, and you can't really think about it. I mean, it's like I said, it's really, everything's moving at the speed of light here. So you have to be able to have those systems that will just prompt you to reply for things. I mean, a lot of people, you'll talk to them and they've got 6 different windows open because they're looking for Facebook messages, and they're looking for text, they're looking for emails, and they don't want to drop the ball on any of them, which is the right thing to do. But that does become overwhelming.
And I guess that's where automation really kind of plays a part as well, because if there's anything that could be a simple reply, I think the first thing that comes to my head is when you kind of send a message, is that initial response back, like, hey, we've received your message, confirmation that this has kind of came through. When you talked back about the FedExing the mail, like that, the time before you and tracking with that, like now, I just think about the fact that I would send a package and generally trust it would get there, and I had no ability to find out, seems so foreign just to me. But even going further, but I think in setting up some automations, you kind of can, maybe I'll say, buy yourself some time, for kind of a lack of better phrasing, but it still comes down to you prioritizing, though, what eventually your time's going to need, correct?
Yeah, so there's a couple things. So typically in a home services business, there's only one or two people that are interacting with customers and prospects, right? And you could get overwhelmed very quickly. So I have seen where we had 3 or 4 or 5 calls at one time requesting information about the business. We can only handle one of them at a time. So we created a tool where when someone called you and didn't, they abandoned the call or they left a voicemail, it gave it a little bit of time, and then like 15 seconds later, it sent them a text and said, "Hey, I saw that you called. I'm on another call right now. I will call you as soon as I can, or you feel free to text me." Okay. And that used to be, somebody's got to program that. It's got to, it's going to cost money. But most people are using a digital phone system now, an IP phone system, and it was literally just setting up a little script that ran in Zapier, so that if you had if something went to voicemail, it just prompted a text to go out and send that message. I've seen us take 5 calls at one time and close 4 of them. So we were able to stop the client from shopping and wait on us until we got back to them, and it could have been 10, 15, 20 minutes later.
I love that example, because a lot of the times we hear when people talk about it, of embracing technology, is sometimes when you talk about, it's just a simple script in Zapier and things like that, they're like, well, I'm not tech savvy, so the time to learn that is actually going to take away. So I know that this manual process seems like it's arbitrary, but it's that sort of deal. How do you respond when someone kind of pitches that to you? Like, I just feel like I'm so not tech savvy that I feel like releasing my business to these automations and those sort of processes, I feel I'm going to be super disconnected. How do you respond when someone kind of brings that to you?
Well, first of all, you have to understand that I didn't touch a computer until I was in college, and we only played games on them. I mean, that was it. So anything that I have learned, I learned, since I was out of school. So and it's easier to learn it today than it was then. I mean, that's the basics. So you do have to have some type of embracing. It's not fair to say, I'm just not going to deal with technology anymore. I mean, but for one thing, you're carrying a computer around in your pocket all day long that can do, you can run your whole business on it. Matter of fact, I have a short-term rental, and that's how I run the whole thing, is through an app on that. So you can run your entire business on your phone. You're already doing it properly. You're probably. So I guess the answer to your question there to start with is you're going to have some type of embracing. The second thing is tools are going to continue to get easier and easier and easier. There's a whole movement right now on low code and no code programming, where, and let's just take an example as a lot of people understand websites at least a little bit, if for no other reason because they had MySpace growing up, right? So MySpace taught everybody how to do HTML code, for this certain era, this certain generation out there. But no one does HTML anymore. You can literally sign up for Wix or one of those types of website programs and go on there and create a beautiful website. Now, is it the same website that a professional can create for you? No, it's probably not, because you don't have some of that skill set that they have. But you can do it. It'll look nice. It'll get you started. And it's just, we're going to see more and more tools like that. That allow people to do programming and run their business without really having a lot of that deep technology background. I'm not a programmer. I call myself, I'm a good user of programs.
Yeah, I like that. On the other side of that coin, someone that's embraced technology, they're finding out that more and more as technology evolves, that they're able to kind of get some more from it, right? And I wonder, as I talked a little bit towards the top of the show about kind of like the data overload, do you think it's important when trying to kind of build your tech stack and things like that to understand what data you're getting from what, but how you're going to use the data at each point of it? Because I think as you kind of embrace more and you build a deeper stack, that's where potentially can start looking at that data overload. Or perhaps there's data that doesn't really need to be acted on immediately, but it's going to be important, long term. As someone, I see you kind of active on Twitter talking about your tech stack in particular and things like that. Is that a consideration you kind of put in when you look at what you're going to add to that of what data am I getting? How am I going to use it?
Yeah. So first of all, I will not add any new software that does not communicate to the other software, because we're to that point now. And if you can't, if it can't communicate through Zapier, which is, for people who don't know what that is, that's sort of a middle piece of software that enables everybody else to talk to each other. Matter of fact, I had a great texting product that I love to use, and I had to drop it because they weren't integrated with another piece of software that I used. And the one I'm using is not as good, but it's integrated, and the integration is much more valuable to me. So that's the first thing, is I look for software, first, that's going to do the job, but also it's going to be integrated. Now, part of the reason for that is I need, let's just take an example of databases. We have a database in our CRM. We have a database with Responsibid. We have a database with our texting software. We have another database with another CRM that we're running, and then we're running MailChimp. There's 5 databases. You cannot possibly keep those all 5 synced up together manually. Just won't happen. So we created a few links to make that happen, so that when somebody, in the beauty is I don't add any new customers into my databases. They add themselves into Responsibid. Responsibid talks to Jobber. Jobber talks to MailChimp. I think Responsibid's talking to you guys at NiceJob. And Responsibid talks to, or actually Jobber's talking to my texting software, and it's updating everything, right? Now that sounds super complicated, but it's really just going into Zapier and saying, I need these 2 pieces to talk, and this is how to make it work. Now let's just say you don't know how to do that, right? I mean, so I'm a good Excel user, but I don't know how to do Excel macros. And anybody who's ever used a macro, they're really powerful. But there's a guy overseas that I found on Fiverr, and he's a pro, and he charges me $15 to create a spreadsheet. So, and then all I have to do is use it, and I'll go back. I'm a good user. I'm not a great creator. Yeah, and so there's a lot of ways to handle stuff like that.
And it also goes, you talked about them talking to one another. As I know, and from your experience with NiceJob, is we actively try to keep in contact with your jobbers, your Responsibids, to make sure that we keep that integration. So for a lot of people, we'll say, hey, if you're not sure how to connect these 2, we can help you do that. And there's a lot of others, not just NiceJob specific, a lot of other softwares that they understand how important that is.
That's right.
If you have the one you like, because for example, like just Responsibid, the Jobber thing is, both of those could trigger NiceJob. And depending on what makes sense for your business or how you want, this kind of leads to my next question is, did you map out where you thought the data flow should go? So for example, Responsibid can easily import that to NiceJob, that customer information, and they can run from there. But then you can also have it come directly from Jobber, be triggered by that. You also could have it triggered, through Zapier and a couple of other instances. So knowing what's going to trigger what when. Did you map out, okay, this is the data point, this is the travel through, or is it this is the customer journey and these are the interactions? If you mapped it out, how did you do it?
Yeah, the answer is both things there. So first of all, I think you need to start at the customer journey. You need to say, what am I trying to accomplish? Okay. So with NiceJob, obviously I want to get a review out to them after the job closes, and pretty soon after the job closes, right?
Yeah.
Right. So then after you've decided, how you want that to work, then you need to decide, what has the best trigger to make that happen. Okay. Because in Jobber, for instance, that's going to happen immediately. Okay. In Responsibid, I can actually go in and put a delay in there. So let's just say, for instance, that we do a lot of one-time type work, and it can be anything. I wash windows. Okay, I'm terrible at washing windows. Matter of fact, I just said washing windows, and I've been corrected that I should say cleaning windows.
Yes.
By Megan Likes.
I've got that correction before too. Like we're cleaning them. Sorry.
So let's say that that I know that if I'm going to get a complaint, that it's going to come within the first day. Okay. So I could go in and I could say, which of the softwares will allow me to not send my review out until after 24 hours. And then I have time if a complaint comes in to have handled that complaint, and then the review goes out. Okay. If they don't have any complaints, perfect. Went out 24 hours later. So I look for triggers that, and just so people understand, there's two things that can happen in Zapier. Either something has to trigger a reaction, and then it's the action that's being taken. Yeah. And I didn't intend to get on like a super technical thing here, but that's sort of where we're going. But so I look at the triggers and say what triggers are available, because every software has different triggers, and then what action can be taken based on that. So that's sort of but you always start at the top. You start at the top, and it's what's the business problem I'm trying to solve, and then figure out how to solve it. And because Zapier is such a ubiquitous type software, I mean, there's so many people who interact with it that even if the software that I want to interact with it doesn't, chances are it's talking to another piece of software, and I can make the same thing happen, by another piece of software's reaction.
Yeah, and you talked about getting technical, but for me, it's looping back to where we started. Is what am I doing with this data? Do I need to be looking at all of it all the time? And throughout each software it's probably not important. I'll just use ourselves to be safe, but like within NiceJob, to look at your people list, because that is being populated by a previous trigger, right? So within Jobber, that's where you're seeing your work orders, your invoices, things like that. So by knowing this data is going to go through the pathway, be used in important steps automatically, that then can allow you to look at the actionable data, right? So what becomes the ticket that I'm responding to, right? Is it calling this person back? Is it making sure that, they've left the review, but do we get the full invoice or something like that? Like, it allows you to almost kind of manage the actionable data while still having all the other data completely collected, so that if you're diving back into NiceJob to look at your topic insights, right? You're thinking about redoing some of your ads. You want to go in and see exactly what your reviews are saying. That might not be something you have to check into every sort of day. Now that data's there, you can see it every single day if you want, but now when it comes to action time, so the action is I'm refreshing my ad copy, I want to find new reviews, or I want to figure out what we should be doing, I look at that data point. Or perhaps I'm looking to change my pricing, so I'm going to go to this particular software and figure out where my profits are, things like that. Or I want to see, is my staff a bit too busy, I'm going to this software and seeing how many jobs they're able to work per day and things like that. And so it's almost to maybe prevent that data overload, is you now have what your functional data is, and then perhaps now you can start picking out and really determine the actionable data. I mean, that's my interpretation of it. Does that make sense to you?
And I would say the next step to this, which we haven't really seen in our industries yet, is how do you take that actionable data now and present it to you in a way that it's formatted in a way that you can take action on it, and that the action's been taken, and that there's a paper trail, or so to speak, of the action. So, and also, how can it be collegial, so that if you're working with 2 or 3 people in the office, that you can make sure that they did what they said they were going to do, or if it's a customer that they know more about, to take that data and send it to them, so that they're the one taking the action and not you. There's a lot of different pieces to that. The other piece to it is dashboards. So dashboards have been out for a long time. Everybody knows dashboards are a really useful tool. We don't really have a good dashboard software in our industry that everybody's talking to. But we really what we should have when you're running a business is I should have 2 screens. One of the screens I really prefer just to be my phone. But one of the screens is showing me a dashboard of my business. It's showing me what's going on, and the other dashboard on my phone is showing me all the transactions that are happening right now. So I can see all the customer interactions, who's calling, who's texting, who's emailing, and watch what's going on. If I have that, I mean, you can run these things so easily and never drop the ball on anything.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I never really thought about that before, of kind of the dashboard for action, or kind of being able to have that ticket task list or whatever you kind of go in. That does seem like a next step that really would probably elevate everything to the next level. I think that could almost be an episode on its own there. Royce, if anyone who's listening to this podcast wants to either learn more about you, connect with you, or to see what you have going on, where should we direct them towards?
There's a couple of great places that I interact with folks at. One is, like you said, I'm doing a lot of things on Twitter, and my Twitter handle is the @ Royce Ard, ROYCEARD. Then the other would be, I have a Facebook group called the High Tech House Cleaner. You don't have to be a maid service to use it. And it's really just a resource. So if you come there and you have a question about some software, we'll find somebody who can answer the question for you. Not necessarily the technical type stuff. I mean, the software vendor is going to be a better opportunity to answer that. But if it's like, I'm looking at purchasing this software, is anyone using it, and how's it going to improve my business? I'll bet we have somebody there who's doing that.
Yeah, and all those things that Royce mentioned, we'll have, if you're watching on YouTube, down in the description below. If you're listening to the audio-only version, we'll have it in the show notes. So be sure to connect with Royce. Royce, an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join us here on the Nice Job Podcast.
I appreciate it. Thank you for the nice job. One thing I would like to say, just as, we have over 200 reviews on Google, and it's a huge differentiator, and that's because of Nice Job.
Awesome. I appreciate that, Royce. We're thankful for you're part of our community here, and so we really do appreciate it there. And we'll be talking soon.
Thanks.
Thanks so much for checking out the video. Remember, you can listen to the full episode of our podcast on Spotify, iTunes, Buzzsprout, or wherever you get your podcasts. Here on YouTube, I want to invite you to subscribe by clicking right there, or you can check out 2 other videos. One, our most recent podcast, and the other to learn a little bit more about NiceJob. So click one of those things, and I can go home.